His range from basic to applied, from conceptual to concrete. His presence is felt everywhere. Now, the specific catalyst for today, though, I have to share with you. Last ABA, a young behavior analyst, I think uncertified, was explaining to me where token systems came from. And he said that token systems were invented by a preschool teacher in South Dakota. Now, I know a couple of preschool teachers, don't we, Jim?
That's
who
funny.
in fact could have done this. But I was astounded at this attribution, this misattribution, especially by the view that token systems were some sort of contrivance, some kind of gimmick, tricky, as opposed to the ingenious configuration based on the profound principles of conditioned reinforcement and its impact across literally hundreds and thousands of applications and to the betterment of literally hundreds and thousands of lives. So it sensitized me to the benefits that it would be time to pause to remember our roots, the origins of our ideas, and especially to understand the conceptual underpinning and the course of accumulated knowledge that bring us here today. And of course, for that, we need Nate. Nate was gracious and enthusiastic. I even told him the story about his preschool teacher. I told him, by the way, one other example of my concern about the disconnect between where we've come from and where we are. I didn't mean to mention this in an introduction on Nate, but I have to prolong this introduction. So I'll go ahead and tell a Todd and Mont story. Todd Risley, Mont Wolf, Jim and Jan and I were in Arizona, and we were talking about very much the same topic, the origins of ideas. That we were in a restaurant, and a waitress was waiting on us, and I was going to demonstrate to Mont and Todd what their impact on the world had been. And so I turned to this waitress, and I said, "Do you know the concept of timeout?" And she went, "Oh, yes, I do." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, when my boyfriend and I get stressed, we get in the hot tub, and I rub his back, and he rubs my back, and it's time out." And I said to Todd, "Congratulations, you invented foreplay." So I think it's time to reconnect to our roots. I asked Nate to do this, and he was gracious as always, and he asked in turn, "What are you interested in?" And I said, "Anything you want to teach us, from overall strategies in the course of ideas to specific areas of inquiry." So this is an open forum to Nate. It's a celebration of his contributions. It's also casual. Nate indicated that he may break halfway through before our lunch break at 12 to entertain questions. Of course, we're delighted that our brother and sister from the north are with us, and they can, hi guys, and they can of course send their questions along as well. This is a See Now system that later this afternoon, those of you who are interested, we're going to demonstrate further. But it's a very interactive and responsive video system. So I ask only that you enjoy yourself, that you learn, and that you celebrate this great man, Nate Azrin.
Well, I'm just delighted to be here. Previous workers, not to mention a member of my whole family, come down here, so I'm just very delighted to be here. In terms of what I'll be talking about, if you said anything I want to, I have no video with me to present, and that may seem like a liability, but as I was talking to Jim beforehand, we don't have to worry about the thing going wrong because we didn't bring an extension cord or anything, so nothing will go wrong with the video. And I decided not to talk about the most recent findings, so I will try to squeeze that in, but rather rather to have a more broad perspective of the kind of questions that I had heard when we had dinner yesterday. People said they would like the more personal part. So what I did is I made a list of some of the different areas I've worked on, and it's so great that every time I look over it, I say, whoops, I forgot something. And then the last one, I even started numbering them, and the last one was 15 different areas, all of which have no resemblance to each other, 50 very different areas. And so I thought the thing that would be the most interesting to you would be to take each of those areas and to describe the part of it that you don't see in the journals. I will describe them briefly and what the results are, so that if you haven't read them, which I'm sure you can possibly have read all of them, then I won't be talking down to you. I won't be assuming you did. So I'll give you a brief summary of something. But I will give the more personal part, like how did I happen to get interested in that? And most important, what was the conceptual orientation that I had in approaching that problem, and why I included particular procedures? Because some of these are areas that there were no outcome studies on before, and yet they have become in common use. And I'll start off with those 3 or 4 that are in the most common use, and explain how it is that they came about, and then in somewhat more general perspective, talk about not only how did one get there regarding the specific areas of study, but rather how did I get there? And then as some people have asked, what was Skinner like, working with him at Harvard, under him at Harvard? Why did somebody from such an illustrious, world-famous institution like Harvard University come to such a small town state hospital, population 4,000, 3,900 of which were patients at the hospital, and the other 100 were employees. But I wanted to give you some of the flavor of that. And why did I go into behavior modification? That's something I've asked many of you. What got you started in this field? And so I'll give you that as a brief background, but I think the real schmaltzy part of it, the part to be the most interesting, would be to take the specific problem areas and what made me think of the token economy, or why did I decide to work on such a world-shaking problem like toilet training or nail biting, which seems so trivial unless you have a child who's not toilet trained or you are a nail biter. So let me start pretty much at the beginning. I'm older, I think, than almost all of you, like all of you, I came into psychology, went into behavior analysis for one reason, and that's to help people. To do things, not to make money, not to get either fame, wealth, or glory, but to help people. That's why we all went into the field, and I don't know anybody who hasn't done that. And I went into it in a particular way, and that is let me simplify that. The broad outline, the conclusion, if we had to tie all these things together, would be that I see behavioral psychology as the most productive, the most definitive, the most validated, the most dynamic, the most wide-ranging conceptual scheme that there is for dealing with the wide multiplicity of problems that people have, whether they are clinical problems, whether they're developmental problems, or whether they are simply problems of daily living, such as employment and that's been very, very widely used. They call it the point system, or reward system, as you said, for many different problems. And so there's no reason now when retarded individuals, no matter how low a level of functioning they are, there's no reason why we can't have at least these self-care skills having a functioning. And of course, those same principles, if you want to teach them something else, and we'll see later when we talk about job finding, we had some of these people, not the profound ones, but the higher level ones, how we got them jobs, competitive employment, not workshop, competitive employment, and not special things like McDonald's. So the same principles we use then in designing a procedure for normal children. Now, how did they happen to work on that? Well, the business manager of the hospital said that they were having trouble training their young child, and said they were so successful training the family retarded. Surely we have some sage advice for them. So we sat and now work on with normal children. Now it's an entirely different task. They can talk, they can listen, they can imagine, they have social relationship, they have all kinds of fantastic reinforcements available for them. And so that was wonderful. There was the same type of general strategy. And I confess that's one of the problems I worked on, where I actually started off listing procedures. I said, well, I want to teach them to toilet themselves. These are just young, they're normal, they're young, but they're normal. And so I made a list of all of the generalizations that we had, principles of learning, and how can I incorporate every one of them in a program that hangs together. And so I made a list. Well, you want reinforcements, and you want them to be continuous. You want to use forward chaining. And you want a variety of reinforcements to avoid satiation. You want to go into use verbal praise, and especially since they're young, use things that attach them because they have limited language. You want to speak to them only in short phrases, preferably monosyllables. You want to accompany it with all of the extra stimuli that you have, and that is, you want to use demonstration. You want to use imitation, and that was a problem how to use imitation. Well, one of the things I instructed the parents to have the child accompany them when they voted. And then significant others, you want them to be brought in to be reinforcers. You want to use the forward chaining pattern. And you want it to be fun, right? Because that's important for that particular population. It's not like a captive population that you have in an institution. It has to be fun. It has to be enjoyable. And you want it to be fast, right? You want to combine all these things, and you don't want to wait 6 months or a year and worry about, well, they would have outgrown it anyhow. You want it to be fast. You want it to happen in minutes. And so I made a list of all those things. And there was one principle I added in there that I hadn't read about before or since, but it just seemed to make so much sense, and that is learning by teaching. And all of you who have the teacher course, you probably realize how much more you learn something when you have to teach it to someone. And so it started it off as a game, and again, go and use have to go and recreate the situations. You can't have imitation. So I used the doll. Part of it had a doll, and it had a plug on the bottom so that you could go simulate voiding on that. And you had the child teach the doll how to toilet. So the dolly wants to go to the toilet. You had to stroke the doll, a good doll, you're sitting so quietly. You tell the doll to sit quietly, the doll is sitting quietly. You make sure she's looking right at you, and you tell her that. And all the things you want the child to do, we have her to teach the doll what she wants to do. So it's all a game. You never ask them to let it be toilet trained. They teach the dolly, and after they've done it and they've seen all the prizes and all the rewards that the dolly got, then can I do it? Right? And with that, you don't even wait for them to say, you just said, now you do it. Right? You saw what the dolly did. I want you to do the same. And you use all of those same principles that I mentioned, except now you took advantage of the fact you have somebody that's verbal, and so you don't treat them like an animal. You use words, you explain to them what it is, the reason you go to it, and you tell them, and part of the reinforcement can be not only the edibles that they gave, same thing, you gave praise all the time, and when they reach the final stage, they whoopee, eureka, you went and you gave them some tangible reward, but also all the time that you were teaching them, boy, isn't that right? When your grandmother hears that you talked about that on the phone, as soon as we're finished, we're going to call her on the phone. And so you brought to everybody. And so that was the rationale. The extension of the thing with the retarded in terms of identifying the problem, what kind of problem to work on. But again, purely accidental, what I happened to work on was a business manager asking me for help with working with us. And so many of these problems that working on now, like I'm in the Department of Clinical Psychology now, and they want to work on DSM problems like anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and none of these currently working on over in the DSM. Toilet training is not one. Nocturnal uresis, but not daytime. And working with psychotics, I mean, psychosis is in there, but not work on any of the things that they're talking about. And so there have been a number of schools that have started recently in psychology with a big emphasis, and that is that there's going to work only on having the individual functioning and not deal with their cognitions, because there's a whole field of cognitive therapy where you go and you have thought, cognitive reversal, right? Cognitive restructuring, and all that. And there's been this big movement in the field. Steve Hayes is one of them, it's called acceptance commitment therapy. And the big innovation there is that you deal with functioning and ignore those thoughts, forget those thoughts. And that, to me, that's a throwback to what we were doing right in the beginning. Deal with functioning, right? And the thoughts will follow. You don't have any time to have panicky feeling or anxiety or depression or anything else when you learn how to function in that situation. Well, the end result, as you probably all know, in the toilet training with the normal children, is the book that was written on. Again, I figured, I published on it. After I published on it, I waited. It's like, nobody's going to use that. Who's going to use it? You know, psychologists read it. People don't go to a psychologist. They try to train the kids to go to a pediatrician, or a neurologist, or a urologist. And so the other thing is that use other media. That when you're dealing with other problems, use other media to go to teach. Publications are only the starting point. And I've never written a book about what somebody else did. I only enjoy writing books about what I did. And so that thing on toilet training every time is over economy. Wrote a thing on job finding later, toilet training. And so it's toilet training in less than a day. People offer me this quote that says toilet training in a day. I said, toilet training in less than a day. It took 3.5 hours. And it doesn't just happen. It's because the trainer is busy every single moment of that time talking to the child and arranging things, and set aside that time. None of this thing about just reinforce the child when they go to the toilet, or even ask them when they're ready away from maturation. Well, that seems like a natural time to go to take a break here and to engage in some. And so that seemed like a piece of cake. I'll just take the Maurer procedure and try it out, and order a large number of samples of the urine alarm system, and it had instructions in it, tried it out. And there was another example where it didn't work on any of them. Nothing. The alarm went off. There's a urinator. The alarm went off. They slept right through it. And so there we go again. And if you look at, well, so it was pretty clear, though, it was criticized for Maurer's original article, which had no control group, didn't even have numbers in it, didn't say how many subjects, didn't say how he evaluated it. But still, there was a large number of replications of that showed very definitively that that method does work, and very, very well. So it seemed clear that it was because of dealing with retarded individuals that they had no concern about the alarm going off and slept right through it, which led to, again, an entirely different conceptual reappraisal. What is going on? Why does the urine alarm normally work? Why didn't it work in this case? And coming up with some possible explanation, what could be done about it? And so I come up with an entirely different explanation, that it wasn't Pavlovian conditioning. I couldn't understand how Pavlovian conditioning could do it anyhow. But it did work. And so conceptually, I'm trying to think, well, sleep is reinforcing. We've had a busy day, sleep is reinforcing. If you look at it that way, then what is it that's aversive? It's being awakened, especially in the middle of the night. The alarm goes off, it awakens you, and it's the urination that caused it. That is the relaxation of the muscles in the bladder. And so, looking at it that way, it says that it's an operant. It's not Pavlovian conditioning. It's an operant. And if it's an operant, then it says something else is very important. How can we maximize that? How can we do it in such a way that now will be operative and beneficial for the retarded as well? And so, the simple solution was that when the alarm went off, that you would awaken the resident. Awaken, and of course not just awaken so that they opened up their eyes, but really awaken. And then some of the other things that we had talked about, that if they are awakened, use some of the other procedures we talked about that have been developed in other concepts. Now the concept of correction, that you ask them to assist to the extent they could in remaking the bed, putting dry sheets on, and then the positive practice, giving them practice in going to the bathroom as the alternative, constructive, correct response. Poof. And it worked. It was wonderful. And rapidly, right? The Maurer procedure usually took a couple of weeks before it was effective, and this thing it was effective within a few days. Well, if it works with retarded, then what about now to go through the same kind of logic we saw with regard to the toilet training, having found something that works so well with retarded, how will it work with normals? So tried it out with normals, and again obtained families in which they had a child that was aneurysmic, there was a bedwetting, and tried it out with them, and it was similarly effective. And and all these things, these are published, I'm not making up these stories. And it worked. And then say, well, okay, I'm going to carry this even further. And if it's the awakening that's important, and not the Pavlovian conditioning, then it's not necessary that the child even hear the buzzer. And so I hooked up a long wire that went from the apparatus to the urine sensing pad, and instead of going to a buzzer that was right next to the bed, had it connected, go all the way to where the parents' bedroom was. So the buzzer went off in the parents' bedroom. The child never heard it. And of course, at the time that the parents heard it, they were instructed to now awaken the child and to go through the other procedure, having the child remain to bed. And that worked. So it's an operant. It's not Pavlovian conditioning. It's an operant, and it'll work even with the developmentally disabled if you treat it like an operant and not like Pavlovian, that all you need is the association of the buzzer and the urination. So there's another example of trying something that conceptually in the basis of the literature should work. It didn't work at all. Find a solution to it, and do a conceptual analysis first, come up with a solution on it, because there's no literature on it. If you try to find a literature on treating aneurysms with retarded, it's non-existent, just as in the other area. So that's an alternative, and studies have been done comparing that method now with the urine with normals, and it looks as if they're about comparable in effectiveness. The difference is really being in terms of time and expense. In terms of expense, this method does not require you to have this, well, I tried it without the alarm there at all, just awakening, that you just manually had the parents inspect it. I missed that. Conceptualization, I'll try the same thing out on that and see if it works. And so, and the procedure that I worked with, the self-stimulation, was to go into identify a competing alternative antithetical response. And there were several requirements on that. It wasn't just find something that was antithetical, but it had to be antithetical. That meant you couldn't possibly have the tick while you're engaging in that competing response. Secondly, it had to look very normal, so you couldn't have a tick in the other direction. That would be antithetical. And it had to be something that you could engage in normally without disrupting other activities. The rationale for that being that if it was something that would disrupt other activities, then you're not likely to do it. So it had these other stringent requirements. Well, so that particular case with the torticollis had him tighten the muscles that would keep the head straight. And he did to bring that down, and more important, to do that as soon as possible. Not wait until he actually had the tick, but as soon as he felt that he was about to have it, and he felt a slight movement, immediately do it, and even better, do it when he had even the sensation, or the thought, or whatever. And if you ask people, what is the precursor, is what I call it, they often say, well, I can't really say it. So the feeling, that's fine. As long as you can identify that feeling, and as soon as you feel that, then immediately you lock those muscles in there and tighten them just enough to block the thing. And the critical question always is, okay, now that you're doing that competing response, what we consider to be a competing response, I want you to deliberately try to perform that tick. And when they say, I can't, that's it. We've got it. Now it's just a matter of generalization and maintenance. And it's lots of fun. Everybody has a different kind of tics. I have more fun when people come in with tics trying to figure out what the antithetical response would be. And I always do that by having them engage and say, I'm going to mimic you, but I'm not making fun of you. I'm going to do what you're doing and tell me when it looks about right, the same as what you do. And then when I do that, I start playing around with different postures and movements and to see what inhibited. And then I say, this worked for me, now let me see you try it. And if as often as not, I'll say, yeah, it doesn't work for me too. And then that's the assignment. That we practice it in the session, doing that, and I assign it as a therapy session. And if there is a significant other, either a spouse or a family member or a parent or someone else in the family, have them oversee it and to give reminders. And again, significant others being brought into bear. You don't just pray for generalization, you arrange generalization so that you have the reminders and the reinforcement. And when you see the person going for more than the usual period of time without the tick, praise them. And so always praise the absence of the response, always praise them when you see the intensity. Well, that's the tick. So then what happened is I applied it down to different kinds of ticks and published several articles on using not only the muscular ticks, and also did it on these oral ticks where individuals do strange things inside of their mouth. They suck on their gums, or tongue thrusting, or gum thrusting, kinds of things that you don't even notice. And tried it out and published on a large number of different kinds of ticks and other things that come under the heading, I guess, more of habits. And the ultimate, of course, was doing it on Tourette, because Tourette is considered classically, and as I say largely correctly, as a neurological disorder. What in the world are you doing as a psychologist trying to achieve a neurological disorder? Well, it turns out happily that it works. And the one on the vocal part is, you think, well, that might be the hardest one I use for the tics. So what is the antithesis? What is the competing reaction for nail biting? And the thing is, do something else with your hands. Right? You know that the nail bite's got to come up to your mouth, so the first thing is don't let your hands go above your shoulders. Right? And secondly, get your hands busy doing something else. It's not a matter of don't, it's always do. What is the positive response? Do. So whatever you're doing, you're driving the car, hold the wheel with both hands, you're reading the book, then hold both sides of the book. You're watching television, hold the armrest with one hand, hold the remote with the other, or the cushion. But continue what you're doing. Don't interrupt anything. If you're writing, if you don't have a typewriter, you're actually writing, and the pen is doing something, and then press down on the sheet with the and then and there are a couple of other little twists on it, and it works beautifully. We put an ad in the paper. No, it is so dramatic. It just there are some things that happen immediately. That's one of them. The other one is stuttering, where people come in and they can't get a word out edgewise, and within 1 hour they're talking to you and telling you about all of their life, and there's no blockage at all. And you teach the competing response, and the same thing. Say, now when you're doing that competing response, I want you to deliberately stutter. And I give a dictionary, because they always stutter on V or T or whatever it is. And, okay, now read the words down the list, and they go, blah, 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 blah. Don't stutter. Beforehand, they go, blah, 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 and they can't get to the second word. But very the MD that was in charge there, he routinely used disulfide. So it definitely differs enormously. I did several studies without that. I developed a procedure that has been called, since I named it that, the community reinforcement method. And the basic rationale of that is competing behavior. And the conceptual analysis was analyzing why is it that people become alcoholic. And I said, well, several reasons, obviously. One of them is that it's addictive. That means that once you drink it, then it has this characteristic that it takes more and more of the same quantity, takes more and more quantity to produce the same psychological effect. It feels good, right, as the analyst put it. It's that the superego is alcohol soluble. It gets rid of your conscience, and you do all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't dare do otherwise. It tastes good, and the manufacturers, they go to great lengths with their liqueurs and others to go and to give it a very distinctive flavor. Your white wine and red wine, and the liqueurs come in infinite quantity. And if you stop drinking, then you go through withdrawal, which is a physiological reaction, and you're very, very uncomfortable. And so there are all of these sources of strength of that. Not only that, but it's part of the culture. If you live in France and you don't drink, then you are an anomaly. If you go to any party or any social event and don't drink, then you're considered to be a variant in the culture. That people who work with briefcases in them, not because they have papers in them, they have a pint of liquor, which they're using during the lunch. If you go into a restaurant and order a Coke, or say, I'll take either Coke or a glass of wine, whichever you want, they say, well, the wine is cheaper. And it is. The wine is cheaper than that. And routinely, people have to take a pint a day, and that's considered to be a normal amount. So it's culture. So all these reasons now, taste, right? The adverse effects of stopping, it's a tranquilizer in a way, it's a psychotropic drug, social influences. So the question is now not why is it that people, as the way I analyze it, is why is it that people become addicted? It's why isn't everybody? Why aren't we all addicted? I mean, it tastes good, it's inexpensive. You go to a cocktail party, you have to have a cocktail, or at least pretend that you don't have it. If you're watching a football game or going fishing with your buddy, you have to have a beer. So it's socially mandated, it tastes good, there are withdrawal symptoms of it. So why isn't everybody? And the answer to that, for me, was this conceptual analysis, was it interferes with things. That when you drink enough alcohol, then it'll interfere with your work. And contrary to public opinion, it interferes with sexual arousal, that in treating alcoholics after a while, and it's not uncommon for the wife to say with a male alcoholic that we haven't had sex for years, that it reduces sexual desire. It interferes with your work. You have a DUI if you're doing it while you're driving. There's scarcely any job anywhere that will allow you to be under the influence of alcohol while you're working, even if you're a bartender, because it does interfere with functioning. So what does that suggest as a possible treatment? To increase these competing responses. And so, what kind of things will interfere with it? A job. Well, we're back to the job card, right? You have a job, and it has to be a particular kind of a job. And preferably one that is year-long, and it's not temporary, and that it's not part-time, and that's why people who are ag farmers, they get drunk in the off-season after the harvest, and actors, they get drunk, and after the picture is finished, and house painters, they get drunk after they finish the house. So what you want occupations in which they are enduring, and in which you cannot take voluntary interruptions. And then marital, and that is a significant other who suffers from that, and that is whether it's a legal marriage or otherwise, but that somebody will suffer when you become incapacitated. And so what it suggests is doing marital counseling as part of the alcohol treatment, different community reinforcement. You want to bring the resources of the community to bear. Also, there are many situations in which alcoholism is not tolerated. For example, in religious in temples or churches, your in-laws, right? They're justified in being opposed to the marriage. So there are many clubs and associations that you go to. There are certain groups that are temperate, who will not drink. So increasing those associations. And so when that's suggested, if you're making it as we do, make up a list of people who are drinking, who are what we call risky, to call them risky people, and then others safe, other people who do not drink. and try to arrange their life schedules so that they will spend more time in the safe, with people in the safe column and less in the risky column. And so that's one, and there's peers, associations, and then marriage, vocational interest. And so build up all these competing reactions. And if you do have to drink and you have a significant other, then having a significant other coming with you, because that would be an automatic inhibition, because that significant other is knowing that they're going to be at risk, that you're going to sell the farm, the house will burn down, you give away all the money. And so that's the community reinforcement approach. There's building up all of these things, and then some new studies have been done by others. They've tried doing alcohol counseling with and without, randomly assigning people to either receiving marital or not receiving marital concurrent with the alcohol counseling, and find there's very substantially increased benefit when they do the marital along with it. All right, so here's where I was promoting marriage as a therapy for something else, right? Before we talked about jobs as being a therapy for other things. And so it's an entirely different way of thinking about it. But then that's what that conceptual analysis does. And so I've done studies, several studies with that, doing that type of alcoholism treatment. And it's still nowhere near as popular as AA. Nothing is. People all go to AA first. Even hospitals that have a medical model and they treat them with drugs, that they'll have an AA unit right on the ward there with them. It's so popular. But again, we're not talking about marketing. That's something that I originated, but it's not caught on at all. It's very time consuming. You have to do marital counseling, you have to do job counseling, you have to do daily planning with them in terms of their activity. It's very time consuming. And if there are any clubs or organizations you can belong to that don't do ordinarily, where you don't drink, then encouraging in that. So what you're using is principles of stimulus control, which situations are associated with drinking versus no drinking, and then incompatible responses, finding significant others that are going to increasing the influence of them to the marital counseling they'll naturally exert their influences to decrease the drinking on the part of the individual. And so that's the essence, the principal aspects. There are many other small details, but that's the conceptualization part of it. I tried that out in several studies, I say, and it does work. It does decrease it. It works. I tried some with and without the anti-abuse. And the anti-abuse combined with it is just wonderful. Without it, it isn't. And the anti-abuse by itself, without this other type of counseling, doesn't do anything. What happens is they run out of their 30-day prescription and they don't even bother refilling it. But the combination is wonderful, because then you have the spouse, the member of the family now, that will encourage the individual to take the anti-abuse every day. It does last a few days, depends on how much anti-abuse they're taking. But the two combinations will do it. In terms of the drug addiction, this thing Brad, Donahue and I have been involved in, we have large federal grants, several from National Institutes of Drug Abuse, to use these behavioral youth programs with youth. These are youth who have drug problems, that they suffer from substance dependence, and also from conduct disorder. That is, that they were problems. They were behavior problems in the community or in the home. And the procedures there were somewhat a mixture of some of the other procedures that we talked about. And that is, you do contracting between the parents and the phrase that's used in that is family behavior counseling, that the family is very heavily involved. And so you work with the parents, you have the parents accompany the youth when they come in, which is often the case because they usually don't have transportation. And you do these procedures we talked about with regard to the marital counseling, and that is, you teach them how you draw up a contract between them. It's unlike the token economy, where the token economy is pretty much imposed. In behavioral contracting, it's all negotiation, that each one asks for what they want, and the other and the other would either agree or ask for modifications, and then so you have a formal contract. And what you do is try to build up the positive behaviors that they will attend, and not so much don't do, but what to do. And that is, they will do chores, keep them busy, they will associate with particular friends, they will do a homework. So what you're doing is competing activities, constructive activities, things that will compete with them. They do those things at home, they're not doing them outside where they have access to drugs, but also the stimulus control part of it that we talked about with alcoholism, and that is staying away from people who do use drugs and increase the amount of time and activity with the people who don't use the drugs. And then a good part of what the procedure is also in the communication part of the problem, and that is how to ask for things reinforces, and the other, how do you react to something annoying? If there's something that's annoying from one of your peers, which is often the case, or from your parents, how do you react to it in the way we talked about? Remember the understanding statement, which another better way of designating it is actually anger control. And then you first calm yourself down, and then speaking, and then reacting in that manner. And so that's one of the principal methods of dealing with youth drug abuse. At the time we worked on that, there was hardly any studies doing with youth drug abuse, right? It was all with adults. And so that was one of the first studies that we had on that. And what we did is adapt the procedure that we could develop with the adults with the great. And these are two things I did very recently, and they don't have the big studies that were done on them, but I'm really so delighted with them. One of them was the one on ADHD. And the story on that is that I was asked to go to consult in the school that Nova University has for autistic children. And there was one 4-year-old autistic child that was making the special ed class that he was in. It was just unbearable that he was aggressive. So they called me up and asked me if I would do something, and I worked on aggression with some developmentally disabled people. And I said, sure. We went in, they went and looked at him, and it turned out it wasn't aggression at all. It was, he was just all over the place. He was just bouncing around like a loose cannon. And he knocked over chairs, knocked over tables. If there was a person, he knocked over the person, but he wasn't aggressive against them. They were in space. So with hyperactivity, well, one of the treatments for hyperactivity is the token economy. So decided to use the token economy. What should I use as the reinforcer? And pretty clear what I should use for the response, right? It should be calmness, attentive calmness, because you both have a problem with ADHD attention and ADHD hyperactivity. And so so that was clear, that was the response, but what is the reinforcer? So I went back to my old friend, the Premack principle. What is the high probability behavior? And preferably, what is the highest probability behavior of this fellow? Anybody?
Running around.
Right. Physical activity. Well, when you think about physical activity and ADHD, the usual manner of treating ADHD is, well, let them get it out of their system. They will go out in the playground, then hit a punching bag, right, run around, and get it out of their system. But this way, this is different. The behavioral system, if that's the reinforcer, make it contingent. Contingent on what? On attentive calmness. And so this little fellow who bounces around and could sit on a seat for more than 2-3 seconds, arranged the situation so that when he sat on the seat calmly and looked at you, then he received this reinforcement. We had the right thing arranged right next to the door leading to the playground outside. And so whenever it started off with shaping, it started off with 1 second, which meant literally he just sat down before he could think of getting up. He said, wonderful, you're staying still. And took him outside, and then follow the formula there, and then just give 2 reinforcements at each duration, increase the duration when you do after 2 reinforcements by 50% roughly, which meant 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 7 seconds. Inside 1 hour, he's sitting there as calmly as can be. And the teachers come in and ask him to be grumbling. What did we do to him? And then we got him into his regular classroom. And so that really was a perversion. You're using the symptom as a reinforcer. The symptom is a reinforcer for the absence of the symptom. But I told you the logic in doing it. After I worked out, I said, no, this can't be. I mean, how in the world can you use, and just to see whether that was the case, that we're in control, and that is giving the reinforcer, the physical activity, not contingent, so that every minute, regardless of what he did, he could go out and play. Then come back, regardless of what he did, went out and played. If dissipating all that energy was the red cure, which is the common belief, it shouldn't have been let. It's nothing, it didn't do anything. He didn't average more than 1 or 2 seconds on that seat. The other way, it was just sat there completely. Well, so I was very excited about that, because it just followed conceptually so clearly, and the result, though, totally wonderful. And so I went ahead and went off and said, okay, how can I use that in the classroom? So I got a classroom that had 2 or 3 hyperactive kids in it, kids who were officially hyperactive and others that were just unofficially, and arranged the procedure in the classroom. And there, what it involved is a group contingency, and that is that when the class was attentively and calm and did not require more than one, the rule was more than one reminder by the teacher that there was a 5-minute break, one in the mid-class and one at the end, and that worked out beautifully. So it's a whole different way this entire, and that's very recent, and even though I only did it with a few people, it's so conceptually so. While working with retarded individuals in South Florida, I had some residents there in Jack who engaged in what I guess is best described as projectile vomiting. They self-induced vomiting. It wasn't because they weren't like the bulimics, they weren't doing it to lose weight. If you asked them to do something they didn't like, or you had an activity that they didn't like, they vomited on you. They sought you out, and they vomited on you. And so you never asked them that again. It was an very effective operant. And the first thing I did with that is I tried an overcorrection procedure on it. That is that what they did, then had them clean it up, and then in positive practice, had them practice going to the stool and bending over and practice the correct way because they could have been stomach upset, and have them practice eliminating things from their stomach that were producing a problem. And so I did that, and that worked. But then I had 2 more projectile vomitors, and I was about to try something else with them, and then it disappeared. They stopped vomiting. What's wrong? And then in examining what the context might have been, it turns out that I had them concurrently engaged in a mealtime training program. And one of the characteristics of the meal, I was teaching them to eat with a knife and a fork and a spoon, and to eat slowly. And one of the things I did, I also had there is I broke each meal down to 3 parts in order to space out the meal. And I thought, well, maybe that's what caused it. Yeah, which part of it? Don't know. It's not eating with a knife and a fork and a spoon. That shouldn't cause it. But maybe it was the eating slowly. So I did a series of studies on those projectile vomitors, and what I did is I tried measuring what their rate was beforehand, and then tried just slowing their speed down, and then went to the other extreme. That gave them all they wanted, in which they just ate it as soon as it appeared on the table. And their rate of vomiting went up so high that the medical staff said that the study had to be discontinued. And so that was pretty clear that was it. So when I had the opportunity to work with, there was a graduate student, and we were going to work on something else, but he said part-time he was working illegally as a graduate student with somebody in private practice, and he had, one of them was a vomiter, was a bulimic. I said, well, maybe this thing would work with them. And so I brought them in. This is the first did it with one, then I did it with, there were several more. I brought some of them, and I think it was about 6 or 7 altogether. And they, and arranged it, well, the methodology is not important, but ABA, an ABA. The morning meal was slow, the lunch meal, same meal, so it was equating for the food, was slow and fast, and the last was slow, and then reversed it the next day, BAB. So the whole study took 2 days with each subject, which is the best kind of study to do. Right. It makes doctoral students very happy about their dissertation. Yeah. Well, and enormous difference, and that is no vomiting. Just no vomiting. And what I did is actually, I took a subjective scale to see, had them rate what their urge to vomit was. And in the spaced eating, it was there. So I tried that with several more bulimic individuals who I was able to obtain, and the effect was there for all of them. And so but then what happened is something interesting. One of the bulimics, when they were eating slowly, kept saying, "I'm full. I can't eat anymore. What's going on?" Because conceptually, the reason why you're vomiting is you're eating all of this extra food, you've got this pressure in your stomach, and the same thing with the retarded. That's what I thought they were doing. When you gave them all they wanted to eat, they vomited terribly, so it's pressure in their stomach. When they eat slowly, that gives time for the food, it's the same amount of food, it gives time for the food to pass from their stomach into their intestines, so you get less pressure on their stomach. And no, it didn't make any sense. Does eating slowly make you feel satiated sooner, that you will eat less food, and yet subjectively feel that you have had enough? So, on to the drawing board, right? So I did a study on that. And it was easy to get people who were desirous of losing weight. Went to the school, has a fitness center, and just asked how many people they would like to be in the study. They were trying to get at some of the causes of hunger. And the whole group volunteered. And so we did the study with them, and this time the response that we had was, well, we had two responses. I give the one that we have all the data on. Asked them how satiated were they, subjective, right? So it's behaviorist, and yet I didn't feel like waiting 6 months to find out what the effects of this thing would be. And sure enough, it was something like a 3-to-1 difference. That when they ate slowly, they felt satiated. Same with the equivalent amount of food, not the same amount of time, because when eating slowly, obviously it takes longer. Did that. But then what that suggested is the next step, which is what we're doing now, and that is measuring how much they ate. Give them the meal, eat it slowly, and now that when you're satiated, stop. Forget about the subjective measure, just stop. And so it's real neat. In other words, that's one of these, there's so many measures that, again, that Frederick Stewart developed in terms of eating and weight control. But this is a totally different method. And then eat slowly, and you will feel full sooner, and you won't want to eat anymore. So anyhow, those are 2 very recent things. The one about the hyperactivity and the one about the bulimia and actually the weight reduction. Well, that's it. Getting back to what we started off saying, that this is an incredible array of different problems, right, between bulimia, weight reduction, job finding, marital, the autistic individual, the retarded individual, marital counseling, the depression, and again, that what I started off with, the behavioral model is just such a powerful one. The notion that it deals only with very restricted responses and it's mechanical and doesn't take into account one's emotions or one's values it's antithetical. I just see the other points of view as just being tangential to what we really think should be done. And so it's really very, very exciting. What is the message for you personally? To the extent that you're willing to go to try different problems, the world is open to you. But even if you take some of the problems that have been developed by behaviors, the things that are comorbid with your development depression and anxiety and the social relations, there certainly are, or employment, then I think just go for it. It's far more exciting than dealing with just one problem. That you're dealing with, what's that phrase, the whole person. We're dealing with all of the aspects of the person, and that the behavioral model doesn't have any constraints on working on these very complex interpersonal types of issues and interpersonal relationships. So I thank you for your kind attention.